Okay, great. Well, this is the first summer in probably 7 or 8 years that I didn't manage to get out to Star Island or Appledore. Kind of a bummer. I just got so busy with stuff, and COVID also kind of threw a kink in everybody's star venturings. But you know, it's back in swing. I'm hoping to make it next year because I miss it, as I'm sure anyone does who spends any time out there and can't get back. For lots of reasons. And artists and writers have been feeling that and wanting to express that in their work for many years. I mean, we always hear about Childe Hassam. You know Childe Hassam? Yeah, just about everybody. Arthur Quartley? No. See, that's it. So I went in and I did some digging to find out who else besides, you know, had done some work out there. I'm an artist primarily. So when I go out there, I'm usually going out there in order to paint. And a lot of my friends are folks who've gone out there to paint. And so I have some of their work in here. So I have a fairly representative contemporary collection. And so it was a matter of just digging in and into the history and just trying to get as kind of a cross section of all the artists, painters especially, who've been out there since the 1830s or 40s. So we'll look at all that work. The way I set it up is also tries to be a kind of history of American art in miniature, in that it's kind of arranged by chronology and movement. So we'll be starting with the earliest work that's an imitation of Dutch marine painting and moving into Romanticism, which was a vast umbrella term for the imaginative literature and painting of the 1700s, 1800s in Europe and also in America. Then we'll move into French Impressionism and a couple little pieces of modernism, and then into the contemporary. So you get to kind of see a sort of whole arc of styles. And so that's mainly what I want to talk about is the styles of the work. And first, just look at these slides and talk. I don't have a great deal of historical information to give you that, you know, much of which you probably already have a sense of anyway. So mostly I'm just going to be introducing some paintings that you've probably never seen, but of some very familiar scenes. And before I go any further, is it possible to get these lights taken off? Get some better color. There you go. So this is Arthur Quartley, Isles of Shoals from the mouth of Portsmouth Harbor. And does that look familiar to you, that landmark there? It's one of those things I always look for. It's like, aha, I'm leaving Portsmouth, heading to the star. It's kind of cool to note that whaleback light went through a few iterations. The original had a wood kind of enclosure around it, and it was built back into, and then they built the second foghorn to it in 1872. Yeah, and then this was painted in, so the foghorn was 1872. Oh no, the fog signal was 1878, but the lighthouse was new in 72. Oops, I want to go back one. Yeah. Okay, so this one is 1873, so it's right after that. So now only the lights gone. Fog thing is completely gone, right? I think it's just one tower now. So starting with European classicism. So these are the paintings of European nobility, actually, who would have commissioned these works from artists in Europe from anywhere from like 1650 through to the late 1800s. This classical style was a kind of standard for just sort of mainstream art, I guess, as it were. James Butterworth also was an English painter, born in England, and moved to New Jersey in 1845, and came out to the Shoals and captured this in 1850. And I want to show you a couple other paintings from this period, but I want to show you another one of his first, so you can see just how formulaic this was. Look at those two paintings. Kind of like the same painting. Kind of weird. Yeah, just change the palette, change the weather. It's because the painters, I think, in classical, Europe and later, they were not out to prove their individuality the way 20th century after artists were. They were providing a craft, a service, to, in many cases, the European shipping, like this is a seascape with Dutch shipping. This is where the genre began with the Dutch. So it would have been the owners of those ships who commissioned these works. So they could sort of sit back in their, mansion and say, yes, my ship's bringing spices. All those say so. But again, the formula, it's like this one's just the same formula, it was just flipped around. Almost the same angle for the ships. So one big one and a couple smaller ones. And this was 1645. So that's 200 years of consistency. It's just kind of amazing. And what really shook all that up, first of all, was Romanticism. I mean, ultimately it was modernism, but Romanticism kind of came first. Really, the boat. Sorry, I could not think of anything else to say. All right, yeah. So the Dusseldorf School was an academy in the 1800s that became very popular in Germany, and it evolved into a kind of bastion of Romanticism. A lot of incredibly dramatic and forceful and entirely realistic paintings came out of this school. And the Dusseldorf School is important to American painting too, because a lot of the painters from the mid-1800s to the 1880s or so, many of them went to Europe and studied there before Paris became the Mecca. They would go to Dusseldorf. That was the renowned art center academy. So they would have they had a system for painting where folks would go out and do plein air studies, which means they would paint in the open air, but they wouldn't be painting finished paintings. Today, there's a vast plein air movement where it's all about like going outside and creating a finished painting in nature, on the spot, battling the elements and the bugs and all that. And that didn't really happen until mid-19th century France, and didn't happen to America until the beginning of the 1900s. So this is earlier, before that became the fashion. So how would they get such realism? They were trained in observational painting, and they'd go out and they would make sketches. They would make pen and ink and also oil sketches, but they'd be small. They'd be like just little pieces of things too. It wouldn't be like I made a whole beautiful painting, just maybe that rock, or this wave or this light effect. Then they take these back to the studio and assemble them into larger and magnificent paintings. So they had a kind of synthetic process where they would be in nature, absorb it, learn the language of it, but then go back to the studio and create these imaginative works that may or may not have been based in a particular place. In addition to that interest, and that, I would say just that particular system of painting was also the American style. It was sort of European and American painting did that all the way through the Hudson River until just a little bit after that, I guess, 1900 or so. Then people really, like I said, people really started painting outdoors. So almost all of the work we're going to look at would have been painted that way. And I actually have an example of a sketch that was done on the Shoals by one of those painters who then would go back to the studio. We'll get to that. So just wanted to note another thing about this, this school of painting, in addition to the sort of wild beauty that they captured, there was often an allegorical element to it, or a religious message. I don't think there's a blatant message here, but if you had to say there was one, how would you read this painting? What could you read into this painting from a religious allegorical point of view?
I feel like it says something is risen.
Something is risen. Yeah, right. Yeah. There's this illumination out of the storm. Yes. There's a light. Absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of the paintings do use the light in particular as a way of referencing spirituality and mysticism even. So here we're bringing it back a little bit to the Shoals. This is an example of the influence of the Dusseldorf School on paintings of the Isles of Shoals. So this is Sunset Star Island by Mauritz Haas. And he was a Dutch painter, so he was steeped in that tradition. But he emigrated to New York City and painted and found his way to the Shoals, perhaps because he was in search of such a romantic subject, I would think. You really don't get scenes like that in New York. You gotta go north. So that one on the example, that example on the left is Dusseldorf School painting, and the one on the right is our transplant immigrant. So you can see the similarity in light and the palette, even the scale somewhat, you know. You've got large foregrounded rocks with shipping sort of smaller and in the distance. And that's part of the romantic ethos, you know, is to aggrandize the nature and to place humanity next to that grandeur as a much smaller and less integral part of the whole. Here's another of his Isles of Shoals, and I think that's certainly, anyone recognize that landmark? That cliff? I think it's Miss Underhill's chair. Do you guys know Miss Underhill's chair? You don't know the story? Oh gosh, okay. Yeah. If you walk out you go past Gosport and to the limits of Gosport city limits, and head out to the ledges on the other side, you walk down the end to, you'll see an outcropping of rock, that's it. And there's even a person there up there on the left. I don't know if you see them perched there. That's a little misleading. It's not quite that, you know, grand. It's actually very misleading, but we'll forgive that. And I will say it is totally dramatic and awesome to be up on that rock. I've been there many times. I always go there actually when I go. So the reason it's called Miss Underhill's chair is there's a legend that a young school teacher, Miss Underhill, would come out to the Shoals every summer and sort of as a mission teacher, I guess, you know, trying to educate the rough gems out in the fishing shanties. And apparently she fell in love with a boy who was who for whatever reason, probably religious reasons, the parents didn't like, and so they were separated. And with a broken heart, she came out to the island, and every time she came out during the summer, she would sit on that promontory and read her Bible, perhaps, or perhaps grade papers, who knows. But that was it. She used to sit up there, and it is a great place to sit. So after this tragedy, she is said to have there's got differing accounts. One is she threw herself into the sea in despair. Another is that a, quote, rogue wave came and swept her away. Yet another is that she used to like to go swimming down at the bottom. When no one was looking, she would say, get down her petticoats and jump in the water, and maybe that was what happened. At any rate, she vanished, and there was reports in the newspaper, giving her description. If you find anything about this woman, please let us know. Well, months went by, and I think they finally somebody answered at the end that they found someone a body washed ashore in Lake Elliott, somewhere in Maine, far away.
Wow.
So yeah, so that's Miss Underhill's chair, and you got to go see it. It's really cool to sit up there because it's so high that the gulls fly right in front of you. It's like you're on the same level as the gulls. Although you all know probably about the gulls, how aggressive they can be at certain times of the year. And I made the mistake of going out there in, I guess it was June or whenever the nesting is. I literally got whacked in the head, like dive bombed. Like I saw the gull and it was squawking at me. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna leave now. And I'm walking away, and well, my back was turned. The thing went boom, right in the back of my head, put a hole in my hat, and drew blood. It was serious. It felt, no kidding, like someone took a 2x4 and whacked me because it was just going so fast. Yeah, so you gotta have the high stick. It's true. So anyway, but it's worth risking the gulls if you can get up there. So back to Romanticism. Here's another de Haas. Amazing light in this, huh? I love the spray of the waves coming up around white light. So cool. Moonlight is another, and storms are all like deeply romantic themes. Themes, I mean, for Romanticism. The mystery of it. Now we're gonna look at some brighter work. Harrisonburg Brown is kind of Portsmouth's own native son. This fellow was born here and became a, oh, I'm sorry, no, he wasn't here. He was born in Portland. I have another painter born here in Portsmouth, but he was born in Portland. And he, I don't know a whole lot about him, except that I love this little, it's called a tondo. You see a round painting like that. It's just so cool. I have a few of his. He's a kind of a minor painter, not considered a master or anything. And same with Arthur Quartley. Quartley was kind of like Brown and a couple of these other guys we're going to look at. They're kind of crossover figures between the Romantic and Classical eras and the Impressionists and the innovations that came largely from France later on. Same with this guy, Warren Shepherd. So this is a painting by William Frederick de Haas, and this is the son of Mauritz Frederick that we just looked at. Very different from his father's work. And yet not so. I mean, same idea, rocks in the foreground, you got the crashing waves, ships out there. But what about the style? How does it feel different? Not into it?
It doesn't seem as like cloudy and light focused.
Yeah. It's very even. Oh, well, I was going to say even light, but maybe not. Maybe it's morning, even a little side light there. But still, it's not as dramatically lit, that's for sure.
Seems like everything's the same, like.
Yeah, everything's bathed in a kind of ambient light.
Also much calmer.
Mm-hmm.
It's much flatter almost.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like there's less antagonism, perhaps, between the human and nature at this point. Almost a harmony. Got this, the ship is right there, and it's guys like just, having a wonderful sail, hanging out. You can see him just sitting there, as opposed to some of these, moonlit, mystical, and storm laden scenes. So here's a quarterly. So when people talk about the Hudson River School, folks know what that is? Yes and no? No, okay. It was a period of American landscape painting from about 1830 to 1880 or so, after which things changed up. But it was the dominant mode of painting in the United States during that time, except for portraiture and some historical painting. It was a huge, I don't know what to call it, but a wonderful,
Was it like a physical school, like the Dusseldorf, like, were they like actual schools?
No, not in this case. It's a great question. Yeah.
Maybe a good way of describing it is that before there was photography, there was the school of painting the scenery of the United States so that it could be brought back and be observed and viewed in public places by the population of the country that would not have been able to to, the great Western regions.
More like a
or
school of thought or a style.
Yeah, exactly.
Physical
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I don't have any slides from him, but the guy who was responsible for kicking it off, his name Thomas Cole, who's a British painter, very much of a romantic temperament, but very enamored of North American scenery. And in 1828, he heard about the disaster in the White Mountains, the Willie House, in which a whole family was wiped out by a massive landslide. And this was big news of the day because it touched a nerve, because these folks were like out there pioneering in a hostile wilderness. This was proof that, or well, I don't know if it's proof, but this was a kind of dent in the theory, the narrative that God wants us to be here and we're going to make this a new Eden. And so that really appealed to Cole. And so he went up to the White Mountains and painted the scene where that happened, brought it back to New York, and it was a sensation. And he eventually spawned a huge migration, annual migration of painters into New Hampshire, but also much closer to home, into the Catskill Mountains and all along the Hudson River Valley, where they could get wildernessy looking cliffs and water and untouched wilderness, although it was already under siege from development at that time. And a lot of Cole's paintings are actually coded symbolically as warnings of what can happen if civilization is allowed to run riot past its rightful bounds, let's say. The way they got their name was a critic making fun of them or denigrating them, saying like, yeah, those guys that Hudson River School of everybody painting the river and making it look all romantic, so that's where the word came from. It was actually pejorative at the beginning. So the characteristics of this school I want to talk about. We're going to move past these guys real quick so we can get into it more. Gifford, kind of a crossover. Again, this is Warren Shepherd. These guys are crossovers between the romantic and classical style. They're kind of mishmashes of classical, romantic, and the coming illumination of the Hudson River School. So here we are. Now, this is an example of an American painter who studied at the Dusseldorf School and came back to America and sort of reinvented the whole idea of landscape painting for the new country and the new century, I guess. This is called shoal water. I'm not sure if it means the shoals so much, but it gives you a sense of what the Hudson River painters were after. Here is, was that William Frost? Yeah, so this is the same painter, William Frost Richards, This isn't the Shoals, but it's a way more typical painting for him and for the seascapes of the Hudson River School. Most Hudson River School paintings are of the wilderness, but there's kind of subgenre of seascapes, which are amazing. And they're big. I don't know how big this one particularly is, but it's definitely about 4 feet high and 6 feet wide, maybe even bigger. Large, magnificent paintings that tried to live up to the grandeur that they sought to capture that they saw in nature, wanted to capture. So this is a sketch that Tross Richards made out on Appledore, and this is just an 8x13. So he did this in watercolor and gouache. Gouache is a form of watercolor that's opaque. Watercolor is transparent, and so the gouache gives you those white and richer, sort of chalkier tones that you can get. So that's because these guys would travel with just a little pack, and that allowed them to get right out to the rocks and sit down and make these sketches that they would then later bring into the paintings that were done on a grand scale. There's another one, 40 by 71 inches, called The Rainbow. And like, wow, right? It's just a kind of, there's a wow factor to these paintings. And frankly, that's kind of what got old for the Hudson River School eventually. They were looked at the way we would look at, the next Marvel movie, comic movie, like big, loud, all CGI, trying to wow you to death, it can't ignore it. That's how, and so that's how these became, because I guess they started to seem formulaic, and really I'm talking about after the Civil War, because up until the Civil War, there was a lot of, these paintings are after the Civil War, but there was less unvarnished optimism in the country after the Civil War. There was less, we're God's chosen and we're going to make this an Eden. It was like, no, we're flawed, and we've seen a lot of death, and this isn't good. We hope we can actually survive as a country. So they did, so some of these Hudson River School painters who were massively wealthy built mansions and stuff on the Hudson. Some of them were fine, but others weren't. Like Albert Bierstadt, he's one of the most well-known painters of that school, although he's mostly known for painting out west. He was the one who really opened the East Coast's eyes to what the West looked like in Yosemite and all the grand mountain ranges. And he died in bankruptcy, neglected. People, institutions couldn't give away his paintings. And so that's why I asked, how many people knew about the Hudson River School? Because this is a huge painting. These are, this was like rock star art of the 19th century, but it got completely forgotten about at the turn of modernism. Like in the 1920s, after the Armory show in New York City, 1930s and 40s, 50s, 60s, forget it. Art historians didn't want to talk about this stuff. Museums were ashamed to have it. And they would because what was being talked about was New York City and abstraction. And it was anything but this kind of what they would see as saccharine, fake, really artificial and, out of fashion, bizarrely, almost religious and optimistic painting. Now we can go back to it and really appreciate it, but it wasn't until like the late 70s, 1980s, that these painters started attracting art historians again and becoming sort of re-embraced by the art world. So now these, and I hate to just put numbers on things, but I happened to be seeing when I was researching that this painting, I think sold, or one of his that looked around the scale, sold for like $200,000 recently. which is pretty respectable for a landscape painting, you know? So there's been a massive turnaround in the fortunes of the Hudson River folks. So Alfred Thompson Britcher is the Portsmouth native son, and he was a Hudson River School painter. And you can see that he's following the same format here. He's not quite as, I don't think he's quite as adept at painting as Richards, but he's following the formula, which is what? Where do you see the similarities here? All about the nature, yep. Man being this diminutive aspect of it, but not threatened by nature. What else?
Switched a little bit there, a little further out.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Like they're not foregrounding those rocks anymore, like the Romantics. Why do you think not? What's the purpose of not bringing those rocks right up front? Bingo. It gives you this vaster sense of scale. By taking out the immediate landmark, you become the only measure of distance. So it puts you here, and removing anything between us and the distance makes our eyes go out there where we find this, large, sheltering sky. And that sense of grandeur that's the key aspect to Hudson River School painting. Now there's another one from Britcher. So yeah, born in Portsmouth. There was an academy at Newburyport then, and he also studied with Albert Bierstadt, whom I mentioned, and he moved to New York City. He had kind of a professional life, but then sort of like toward retirement, I guess he managed to sort of dive into art all the way. So it's a very nice painting. Time and Tide. So 1873. So now we're talking about the waning of the Hudson River School, and this is also an Alfred Thompson Britcher. And I'm kind of convinced that that's the North Church there. You agree? I think that's like about where we are, where we're standing, where you would look back into town from over here by the mill dam. I think it's amazing to think that he painted something like that and something like that. So how do we account for that change?
Why did he paint the second picture?
This one here?
Yeah, it's very more impressionist.
Yeah, it's more impressionistic, exactly. So that's the point I want to make. I don't know the date on this, but it had to be 1880s, maybe probably 1890s, or even later. And I think it's a pastel. Hard to say, but at any rate, visible marks. None of them here. This looks like a photograph.
Yeah.
And the color, so different. And the subject, all of it. In this, there's that grandeur, the grand statement. This humble door, little boat, little footbridge.
Little kids.
Little kids, totally. So what happened? Impressionism. Impressionism made it to the United States. Here's another of his. I think I have one more. I like the lighting. I like the color in this one. Oh, this is Quartley. So this is Quartley doing the new thing too, a little bit. Certainly no longer the classical style he was doing. It's a little bit more modern. By 1884, things have changed. And what's changed is France, the French connection. William Morris Hunt was an artist and a teacher and very influential member of the Museum of Fine Art in Boston, which was the museum school then. Museum of Fine Art, yeah, just the Boston, what they now call the Museum School. And he's an interesting character too. He got kicked out of Harvard for gambling. He was the son of a congressman, and in order to reform him, he was sent to Europe with like an escort or something he wanted to study art. So he got to go to all these, he went to Germany first, went to Dusseldorf School, hated it, and made his way to Paris, where he discovered what at the time was very avant-garde painting, which was like the cutting edge work of the day, it was actually not Impressionism yet. It was on the cusp of Impressionism when he was there, 1866. The first Impressionistic show wasn't until I think 1878, but he saw the seeds of it in a particular a group of painters called the Barbizon School painters, and again, not a real school, but a group. And that's his ferry to Appledore, and I love how it's really hasn't changed that much. Okay, so on the bottom we see a French painter, Gustave Courbet, in 1869 painting. Above we see a William Frost Richards painting from 1875. And already I think you can see some of the difference, but when I turn to this one, maybe it's becoming more obvious. So Courbet painted 9 or 10 of these paintings of waves on the Normandy coast in 1869. And that was the first time I think anybody had really just painted a wave, just one wave, where it wasn't trying to be a grand seascape, but it wasn't devoid of meaning either. I mean, as the little commentary on the side there says, they're intense paintings, and they're agitated seas and stormy skies, natural forces. I love what Cézanne said. His tide comes from the depths of ages. But he was the guy, and this is kind of like the default seascape now in the United States now, and it was through the 20th century. But Courbet is the one who started it. It didn't take Americans long. So here is a J. Appleton Brown, Storm of the Isles of Shoals. And it was interesting to me. I only had this at first, which was a woodcut based on the painting. And it was in this 1889 book called American Art. And I noticed that this painting looked a lot like it. Only when I saw it online, it was reversed. As you can see in the bottom, it was actually reversed. I saw that, I was like, wait a minute, that looks like the same painting. So I just reversed it. I was like, yeah, that's totally it. That's the same painting. That's it. I was amazed that painting sold for $600 in 2021. Crazy, right?
The backwards one?
Yeah, it wasn't backwards when they sold it. I mean, if it was the right way, it would have been like 16,000. No. But I was kind of surprised. $600, that's nothing. But very much a French influence there. Another Appleton Brown, and that's the that same cliff, Miss Underhill's chair. So William Morris Hunt comes back into the picture a little bit because it was he who kind of introduced the Boston painters to the Isles of Shoals through Celia Thaxter. They became, she moved in Boston, the same Boston circles as he did, and she invited him up to, and that's what sort of started her parlor. He made connections for her between Childe Hassam and other artists and writers of the time. And tragically, he died on Appledore. This is the last sketch he did. He's said to have just drowned in something like 2 feet of water in one of the pools, not like off the rocks or anything, just like down the pool. He'd had a horrible life. Well, he had a great life until the end, I think. But this is him at the grand old age of 55. I'm 56, and thank God I don't look like that. I mean, this guy saw a lot. He really had a hard time at the end. His studio burned down with all of his great work in it in 1875 or something like that. he took to drink, and he got a commission to do, there was supposed to save him. He got a commission to do the dome inside of, I think it was Albany, the capital in New York. And he didn't do it right, and it started flaking, like just, months after he started doing it. And so they ripped it down, and he was disgraced. And so, poor guy. But he had a lot to do with bringing Impressionism to the United States, almost everything to do with it. He's the one who sent artists over to France. He's the one who brought the first paintings from France to the United States so Boston artists could see them. That's why we have such a great collection in the MFA of Monet's in particular, because he advised all the Boston Brahmins, buy the Impressionists. These guys are, these guys are the future. So I'm going to skip through a few of these, but Celia's garden, and the French influence is obvious because it's so colorful. Everything's sort of out of focus a little bit, sort of elegant, and it's not making a grand dramatic statement so much as sort of celebrating the light glancing off the colors in the garden. Very much an impressionistic stance. That's a pretty one by Jay.
I love seeing the garden, especially because the cottages are over there.
Yeah.
See what it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a photo of it too. That's from her veranda. That painting's at the Courier in Manchester. I don't think it's on display, but it's in their collection. And that brings us to Childe Hassam. And so Childe Hassam was one of the leading Boston painters of the day, and began coming up here, and he really kind of made his mark, I think, through painting from Celia's Appledore. He is just a master at Impressionism, at French Impressionism. He went to Paris, absorbed it like a sponge, and just came back and created these paintings. I think that's on Appledore, but it also that one looks like the one on Star, the trapdeck, to me. I painted that. So some of these you probably have seen. That's a very Van Gogh one. Shows that. And it's not a coincidence. Like I said, the dude was a sponge. I'll show you. How much silk's rock? Anybody know what that is? These things get these funny names, like pulpit rock and things like that. Mostly as a tourist thing, I guess. And they get forgotten. I don't know where that is. I know Appledore somewhere. So that's an example of how he was able to use the Impressionist style to, but also to remain really faithful to what he saw and to do observational painting. He was fresh from Paris when he first visited Appledore, 2 years after getting back. Well, actually, I don't know about that. I could be wrong about that. But I think he probably went back and forth numerous times. I call him the American Monet because one of these paintings is by Claude Monet and one is by Childe Hassam. The one on the right is by Childe Hassam because you can recognize the rocks, but when you look at them, it's like, oh, wow, yeah, I see where he got it. This one too, the one on the right is one of his famous Through the Garden, but the one on the left is Monet, also Through the Garden. I mean, the scale is the same, even the palette, the concept. I think he was a master at painting impressionistic pictures, but I'm not sure, I don't know. Some of his paintings are great, but look at this. He's also known for his flag paintings. Well, Monet was the flag painting guy. He's on the left, Hassam's on the right. kind of debunk them a little bit. So this is interior of Celia Thaxter's salon. Can you spot Celia? See her? Yeah, she's reading. Yeah. Cool painting, but it's based on Edward Vuillard. So, yeah, I don't know. I probably couldn't do it. What am I? But anyway, he also created, in my mind, some very beautiful original pictures. Just purely observational. And he wasn't trying to create, saleable masterpieces that looked like French Impressionism. He did some magnificent work. I love this painting. It's got so much life and mystery. Did anybody make it to the Peabody Essex Museum? A few years ago, they had a fabulous exhibition on Art of the Shoals, and they had all of these Hassams were there, and these were among the most beautiful to me. They were morning and moonrise, or twin paintings next to each other, just super lyrical and soft. And this is almost like a Gustav Klimt. In fact, I probably should have a slide with Klimt next to it because that's so Klimt. But it has this, one art historian famously called this a perfect painting, and it was kind of repeated over and over. So it's pretty cool. It takes a lot of gumption and skill to do a painting with that much water in it, and still not even paint it realistically. It's pretty abstract. And it's a very compelling painting. It's not easy. Hudson too is one of my favorites.
I think it's interesting how the horizon is changing, like from the beginning, they're like down here.
Yeah, that's right. That adds to the abstract nature of it. It makes it more two-dimensional. I can speak from experience on this, that when you make the decision to have a high horizon line, you have to accept that you need to do some extra composing and design work in all of the space that you're leaving yourself. It has to be designed. It can't just be random, because that's the main area that you've got to be able to move the eye within the painting. And so, that's about abstraction. That's about the underlying abstract geometry of painting. So that's kind of like Hassam's modernism, I guess. But they're lovely, incredible paintings. I like this one too.
Yeah.
So simple and honest and direct. I know where that is. I don't know if you do, but that's right by the, is that State Street? I think it's on State Street, right by the Strawberry Bank, yes. That fence is still there. Well, that's Celia's cottage in its glory. Brief interregnum of tonalism here, which was kind of between Hudson River and modernism. I'm just going to flip through it quick. It's where there's a more subdued palette, and emphasis is placed on tonality, analogous or harmonious colors, and the relative lights and darks. Often you get sort of twilight scenes. Just the key is just, unlike Impressionism, it's not an explosion of color or even brush marks. It's a more some say poetic, but it's a lyrical style. That slide. Courbet-ish wave. That's a perfect example of tonalism. So you see, it's more about the mystery and the midtones. So we're moving into modernism now, 1932. This is a fellow who was very young when he studied with Childe Hassam to do his own work on the shoals, Olaf Bronner. Soren Carlson is a sort of undersung lyrical painter who spent a lot of time on the shoals. Love this one. It's all about the sky. That's actually Marginal Way, I think. No, it's not. It's not Marginal Way. That's definitely the shoals. That's Star, right? That would be Gosport up there. I think. I could be off. It might be the Marginal Way. I know he painted in Ogunquit because that is the Bald Head Cliff. Another one of it. Oh, that's another sky. So some modernism here in the style of John Marin. Exploring the shape and geometry, hard lines, abstraction. This guy was working in a genre called American Regionalism. Thomas Hart Benton is on the left, is the one who's known for it, and he was trying out the style here on a fish shack. Star. See the rowboats right there. Still there. Another 1970. Oh, this one. John Hatch, he taught at UNH. Very abstract, but captures the feeling of the shoals too. It's acrylic, but with paper under it too. It's a mixed media. And we're coming into the contemporaries. This is another one by John Hatch, although more, obviously more realistic. Now, a lot of these folks are local painters. Karen Blackwood, she has a studio in the Button Factory, on Congress Street. Lenny Mulaney, plein air painter. So this would have been painted on the site outside. Karen paints in the studio, but she takes a lot of reference photos, and I think she does sketches while she's out. But most of her work is, I think, in the studio.
Is that the steeple that hit you in the head?
It is, and I know that guy. I know where he lives. Austere Daisy, very much in the Childe Hassam Boston School style, impressionistic. Also a Button Factory artist. Bill Parlberg is a watercolorist going on. Captured this view of the hotel. And this one. Is that the art bar? Maybe? There. That's on Smutty Nose. Looking back to Star. Lisa Nunes did a series of gouache paintings out on the island. playing with abstraction and color and light. Fast, sort of fast impression. Just getting the feeling down in abstract strokes. MJ Blanchett was a Seacoast artist, but I think she moved out here recently, moved out of town. So we'll lose her. She's been a much admired artist. Is my first. T.M. Nicholas has a studio in Gloucester, and his father was a well-known painter, is a well-known, I think he's still alive, well-known painter, and they share the studio. That's his father's studio anyway. He's been painting the shoals for 20, 30 years at least.
Is that a watercolor?
No, I don't think so. It's just his style. He does that little hatch marking. These colors are really vibrant. This is another Tom Hughes. These are plein air works done on location. John Stobart is a marine painter as well. He is known for, very realistic precision. He paints ships and yachts mostly, but he's done some really great Star Island work too. I don't know much about this person, Cindy House. I don't think she's local, but she's clearly a realist. And I can't believe that's pastel. I have another one right there. Look at that. She nailed the color of the ocean.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, really beautiful Laura. I'd like to find out more about her. I know. Yeah, I agree. Same.
Yeah, same.
Now you couldn't mistake this for a photograph. This is a print, so this is a woodcut. Or line cut. A few more folks. Nick Sakalarios is I live out by Nashua in Hollis, New Hampshire. She had a studio for many years in Nashua. You know James Aponovich? He's a well-known realist. And I think it's funny that this is his shoals paintings. It's really like, the shoals are like over there, but mostly it's, look at this amazing silhouette I can make. I love the colors in the clouds though. The colors are great.
He's from Manchester.
Yeah, yeah. That's another one. Interesting for him, very dreamy. I don't know much about this guy either, but it's quite the painting.
Yeah.
Appledore, the Atlantic, and the Theory of Gravitation. So I guess he's kind of a scientist and also an artist. He does illustration, probably mostly scientific illustration, but did this amazing curvature of the earth kind of thing. Dawn. Really cool. Oops. Journey. Another well-respected painter, unless the hit the shoals once in a while. Alexandra de Steiger is the winter caretaker of Star Island. She lives out there every winter and has for almost 20 years, I think. And she's a photographer and a musician. She writes songs and has put together an album, but she's better known for her black and white photography of Star during the winter. It's fabulous. It's amazing. Imagine like staying out there, being, you know, at the mercy of the elements like that.
You know, she alone.
Yeah, she is. All by herself, except for the snowy owl that comes with it. Her work was one of the first, my first impressions of Star came through Alex's work. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, gave me a print of Alex's, and I was intrigued. I was hooked. You can get a whole book of hers, Small Island, Big Picture. It's wonderful. Winters of Solitude. Beautiful book. And she was included in that Peabody Essex Museum show of Art of the Shoals. She's the only kind of contemporary, I think, which is pretty much an amazing honor. So, high quality work. Wendy Turner does these amazing prints too. She's also somebody who doesn't really paint on site, but does really dramatic, beautiful impressions of the shoals in the studio. So this is a summary of everything we covered. Started with classical European painting in the style of the Dutch 1600s, all the way up through Romanticism and into the Hudson River School and the American painters who, some of whom studied in Dusseldorf and others who became students in Paris. And then we had the American Impressionism, Regionalism, this sort of brief period between, really it's between 1880 and 1920. It's actually a particularly, it's one of my favorite periods of American art, actually. I really respond to those paintings. And then modernism and right up to the contemporary. This is one of my paintings from, I'll actually show you, I have a couple more sites here. That was just a plein air work I did, but I like these quotes. Here's Nathaniel Hawthorne. This is the guy who wrote House of the Seven Gables and Scarlet Letter. It seems as if some of the massive materials of the world remained superfluous after the creator had finished and were carelessly thrown down here, where the millionth part of them emerged from the sea and in the course of thousands of years have become partially bestrewn with a little soil. I love that kind of, you know, chaos of rock. And so that's what I like. I try to capture some of that feeling of, you know, the bones of, you know, the planet just being sort of strewn. Here's something Celia said I love: rifts and chasms and roughly piled gorges and square quarries of stone and stairways cut as if by human hands. The trapped rock, softer than the granite, was worn away in many places, leaving the bare perpendicular walls 15 or 20 feet high. In some places, the geologists will tell you, certain deep scratches in the solid rock mean that here the glacier ground its way across the world's earlier stages. You know, again, like bringing in the elemental, you know, the groundwork of the creation of the world. That I'm just sort of trying to capture some of that ruggedness and the chasms, you know, when I go out there. That's my Miss Underhill's chair. I did that. And this is my Emil Carlson, you know, version of the shows. Total influence. Rip off, you put that one. I love this quote too. This is from American art historian Barbara Stafford. I don't know, maybe she's English, but anyway, she's talking about Ruskin and his Modern Painters, which is a very influential book of art history, huge two-volume thing that in the 19th century in Britain really kind of discovered and cemented Turner's reputation. Ruskin was like the champion of Turner. And in the book Modern Painters, she says, it's rife with examples of the two eternities of the vacancy and the rock, pitted against transitory manifestations, color gradations of clouds, sunsets, and storms. These opposites, the vacancy and the rock, through their reconciliation, would transcend the beauty of material things by adding their force to individual consciousness, which is, again, I just like that idea of, that there's nothing out there but, rock and space, rock and sky, a little bit of vegetation clinging to it. This is a charcoal that I did out there. I was trying to capture this, of all the stuff I've done out there, this one captures for me the best what I see at the shoals, what I want to say in my work about it, which is like the void of, the chasm where you don't even get a bottom of the painting. The rock, the sheer rock faces disappear into the dark, but they also disappear into the light. Like the light blares through, It's so elemental, and that's what draws artists to the shoals. That's a plein air painting class I took out in 2015. It looks like 1915. It's amazing how little things have changed. Artists is still going and will be, I predict, for the foreseeable future. Because the rocks in the sea are the few things that do not change, and they are wonderfully beautiful, more so than ever, says Childe Hassam. So, questions, comments? Yeah.
I have a few questions to ask you, little questions, like on this Alexandria.
Steiger?
Was she kind of a photography family?
No, I don't think so. I think you're thinking of Steiglitz, Alfred Steiglitz.
Okay, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And William Morris Hunt, was he the one that threw himself in the water?
Yeah,
Okay.
who ended up just face down in a puddle.
And I just have a little statement to make.
Okay.
I love your book, The Boston School.
Oh, thanks.
And it was so well written, and I lived in Boston for years, and they talked about a lot of the stuff, and it was really got across everything really nicely.
Thanks so
This
much.
was great seeing all these extra writers that I haven't seen myself.
Yeah. Writing that book was my introduction to Hunt, and I think he's a really good artist too. If you go down to the MFA in the American Room, there's some Hunt work that's like top notch, really great. I think it might even have one of the big. Well, this is true, but one of the big Niagara Falls might be by Hunt down there. Sure.
Can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
I could never wrap my mind around what was Luminism exactly? Was that the one that was connected to the Middle East thing somehow? Or?
Well,
I've never studied it formally. So.
Yeah. So as I understand it, Luminism is it's so-called is a later phase of the Hudson River School, where the concern wasn't so much about the material, the physicality of the landscape and getting all the plants right, and all the ruggedness and and drama of the rocks and trees. Became more about the suffusion of the painting with light. Like in some of those light seascapes that we were looking at would be considered luminous. I like to see a parallel between the transcendentalists, the writers like Emerson and Thoreau in particular, who saw nature as a window into divinity in a way. They saw that God was immanent in nature. And you can think of the beginning landscape painters painting just what it looked like, and the Luminists sort of painting God shining through the nature in terms of the light. Well, if not God, transcendence, just this, mystical illumination. That's where the word comes from, illumination, luminism. So I love those paintings, and I think they're delightful paintings now. Even they're very affecting for me, even more so than some of the original Hudson River stuff, which I think is great. But I just respond to that feeling that the Luminists got by. If you look at some of the luminous, what they call luminous work, it's almost like the light is about to dissolve any of the physical, like mountains or whatever it is. You'll see like everything is so filled with light that everything looks almost translucent. It's like transparent. It's like the physical world, the material world is dissolving and letting in the immaterial, spiritual world. Yes, Steve?
There was a time in history when, for most of history, when nature was viewed as a medicine for those force.
Yeah.
And then there came a time, I think because of technology, where the idea was accepted that nature was accessible and even conquered.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah. I think you're right.
a product of Renaissance.
Yeah. The conquerability of nature. And by the time we get to the Hudson River School and
Yeah,
others, it's almost like a nostalgia for nature.
right, yeah, that's like Nietzsche where the science destroyed the mystery
Yeah.
of creation.
Right.
So that-
Yeah. Once we had industrialization and wars, people were in need of, the comfort of, an imagined harmonious nature.
Yeah, with the denuding of nature through like lumbering. All of New Hampshire was clear cut
Yeah,
in the 19th century.
that's amazing.
It's slow, Emerson and others responding to that.
Yeah, I know Cole was. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was the guy in Maine, he did all this watercolors of the trees.
Oh,
Most famous.
oh, Winslow Homer?
Yeah, Winslow Homer, just up there.
He did.
Construction.
Oh, really? I don't know if I've seen his clear cuts. Cool.
It's really a question from this participant online.
Okay.
The question is from Anne. It's how much of this is from the show at Childe Hassam?
How much of it is from the show?
I guess how much of it would you say the show?
Oh, not a lot. I mean, a lot of it, I think some of it was included in the show because those are like Hassam's famous, paintings, but it was a great show. And it was just, I think it was mostly just Hassam. It was just Childe Hassam and the Shoals, actually. So all these other painters were nowhere to be seen then. Thanks so much.
Did you both get this library?
I don't think so. I wish it was. Oh, by the way, before you go, there's some cards here that you can take with you And there's a URL on here where you download this PDF of this presentation. If you want. So you just type in that and you should be able to access the
Yes.